So the US job market is doing excellently. 336,000 jobs were added in the month of September. Biggest jump since January. It's soared above analyst expectations. It was 100,000 jobs higher than the highest analyst expectations. The job market is doing extremely well, right? Well, not exactly. In fact, by some metrics, not at all. If you take a look at the amount of people who are taking on full-time work, for example, and the amount of people who are taking on 2 jobs, sometimes even 3, multiple job holders, not just a full-time and a part-time gig on the side, but 2 full-time jobs, those are breaching all-time highs. So while job growth is happening, a great deal of it is out of desperation and not necessarily signaling economic growth here in the United States. But that's what we'll talk about up next. So first things first, let's talk about the strong headline data first and foremost. The unemployment rate rose marginally to 3.8% from 3.6 or 3.7%, a little bit higher than expectations. Nothing crazy, nothing to write home about or scream about. Average hourly earnings also rose by 0.2% month over month. The expectation was for a little bit more, and the year-on-year rate at which average hourly earnings are rising also fell to 4.2%, which of course now is higher than inflation, which for many workers is a sigh of relief. Of course, average hourly earnings have been below the rate of inflation. Wages haven't been able to keep up with prices, and so people have been left destitute. But we'll talk about people being left destitute in just a minute here after I get through the remainder of the headline headline data. But first, a word from our sponsor, River. I love buying Bitcoin, and personally, River is my favorite place to buy it. You can purchase Bitcoin with 0 fees when you do a recurring order via their dollar cost averaging, and you can know your assets are held safely and securely because they have their own proprietary multi-sig custody solution. They don't have a third-party custodian that they're gonna be lending your funds to, and all your funds are held one-to-one in their proprietary cold storage solution. So you can have peace of mind when you buy your Bitcoin, and you can start today at river.com/TBL to get $5 in Bitcoin when you purchase $100. And now on with the show. So September payrolls unexpectedly soared by 336,000. Now this is despite the labor strikes across the country that of course shut many companies down. You can take a look at this chart here. Monthly payrolls change. That's supposed to say change, not chance. I just noticed that. Versus the estimate. And you could see that 336,000 jobs were added right there in blue, right about where my nose is pointing to right there. And that is 166,000 jobs higher than the median estimate, right? That's insane. That's crazy. And it's above the highest analyst estimate, which was 250,000 jobs added. That's excellent, right? Well, kind of. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. If you look past the headline data, which of course many people are not doing, particularly economists that want you to believe the economy is doing extremely well, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. People are taking on second jobs in massive droves. Full-time workers fell by 22,000 workers, while part-time workers rose by 151,000 workers. The reality is Americans are struggling to make ends meet. I'll talk about this in just a second here. The number of people holding 2 full-time jobs just hit an all-time high of 447,000 people. Let me say that again. 2 full-time jobs, people holding them, right? People working 80-hour plus work weeks, 2 full-time jobs, not part-time jobs, hit an all-time high of 447,000 people. That's insane. And of course, it's out of desperation, right? Wages have simply not kept up with prices despite doing relatively well, and this will only get worse. Tight credit will cause wage gains at companies to lag behind price inflation. Ultimately, companies won't be able to pay their workers more as much as they want to because in order to finance their operations, it just got more expensive, right? Not only are their input costs higher, but their borrowing costs are higher. So the reality is wages simply aren't going to keep up with prices. And as this tight credit proliferates throughout the economy, going to make borrowing even harder and therefore going to make it much worse for workers. Prices will continue to outpace the rate of change of wages, right? Strong and resilient, right? Here is the amount of people holding 2 full-time jobs. That's absolutely insane. Take a look at the magnitude of that. 447,000. And these are people that are struggling to make ends meet. I highly doubt that a great deal of people work 2 full-time jobs simply for the fun of it. Sure, remote work and automation makes it easier for people to take 2 remote US jobs while they're on vacation in Ibiza for a few months. But the reality of the situation is a great deal of these people are destitute. They're doing this because they cannot afford to live in the United States, unfortunately. Many people are spending plenty of time in the wage cage. This is the wage cage 9,000. Even after you spend 80-hour weeks in the wage cage, many still can't afford a 3-bedroom house, even on 2 full-time incomes, right? Even if you have a house of of 2 spouses who are on 2 full-time incomes apiece, chances are both of them are working full-time and then another full-time position in order to have a home. And having plenty of children, forget about it. So that's another huge issue for the United States. This is American excellence at its finest. Fun fact, this is actually, not fun fact, that's a stupid thing to say, but this is actually a real patent from Amazon in 2016, minus the crying worker on the inside of it. This is a real patent for a wage cage. Anyway, if we zoom out and take a look at total multiple job holders, so not just 2 full-time jobs, but 2 or more combination of full-time and part-time employment, that is almost reaching an all-time high as well. If you take a look here at this chart, people with 2 or more jobs, which again includes full-time and part-time positions, is reached 8.15 million, which of course, if you ignore the spike that happened pre-COVID, this is, well, actually don't ignore that. That's pretty relevant data. This is the 3rd highest it has ever been, right? So multiple job holders are reaching the 3rd highest they have ever been. That's quite bad. If we zoom out and we take a look at the household survey, right, this $336,000 job addition in the month of September, that is the establishment survey reporting. But if we take a look at the household survey, only 86,000 jobs were added. I'm also trying to say dollars here. Only 86,000 jobs were added according to household surveys, which of course have a much more accurate barometer for these things than the establishment surveys do, right? The actual workers, the actual employees are saying this is how many jobs were added, and it is a far cry from what the establishment is telling you. Also, unemployed workers rose to 6.36 million, which is the highest since January 2022. However, if you include people who are not in the labor force, the unemployment rate should actually be closer to 6.8%. These are people who are considered missing from the labor force, which is some 5 million Americans. If you include those people, which, 6.36 million plus that 5 million, you got 11.36 million, right? Right now, unemployment's at 3.8%. If you add those people who are missing, unemployment rate is more like 6.8%. But of course, there are liars, there are damned liars, and then there are statisticians. And of course, we're talking about statisticians here. We'll take a little break here. You guys know Nick and I are very passionate about cold storage, and that's why my go-to solution is Foundation Devices suite of self-custody solutions. The big one being the Passport. The Passport is the Bitcoin hardware wallet that you already know how to use. You can give it to grandma under the Christmas tree. She's not going to be confused by it. It doesn't look like a calculator. She'll know how to use it as soon as she picks it up, and so will you. You can have peace of mind, take your Bitcoin off of exchanges in a very expedient period of time, and get them stored away safely. And if hardware wallets are not for you, you can try their Envoy app, which is an easy and simple and free to use mobile solution for taking your Bitcoin off of exchanges. You can download that on the Google Play Store or iOS today. Again, that's Envoy. And of course, if you're looking for the hardware wallet solution, it is Passport. Go check out Foundation Devices' suite of intuitive Bitcoin self-custody solutions at foundationdevices.com. And ultimately, this whole thing is to paint to you how there is an extreme underlying weakness in the US economy. And while headline data may not show it, it's not like people are going to stop trying to find work to feed their families and allow their lives to be destroyed. They're going to go out and find work. So if we're just talking about headline numbers, it can be wildly misleading, because the reality of the situation is people are taking on 2 full-time jobs. Now, if we actually even go a step further, if we ignore the headline data, if we take a look one step further, we know that a lot of these people are taking on 2 full-time jobs, but what about the seasonal adjustment? There are extreme seasonal adjustments that actually happen within labor data and within all data in order to smooth it. But the reality of the situation is here, if we take a look at adjusted data, official adjusted data in leisure and hospitality, for example, there was a 96,000 job addition, but unadjusted data shows that sector lost 466,000 jobs in September. So if we're using the unadjusted data, right, and data adjustments are simply for smoothing purposes, right, which is complete nonsense. If we're just talking about one isolated month, which in this case we are, the sector lost 466,000 jobs in the month of September. Of course, coming off of summer, that makes sense. A lot of these people are returning to their normal jobs, and also, but the fact of the matter is, private sector payrolls, which includes those people who may be leaving leisure and hospitality jobs to go to their main jobs, also lost 399,000 jobs. So when we're not seasonally adjusting, the picture is abundantly clear. Another interesting thing too, okay, of these people who are employed, who are they being employed by? Well, here's where the real kicker is. Total payrolls rose by 585,000 jobs, yet private payrolls, right, dropped by 399,000 jobs. Okay, that's interesting. So negative 399,000 from private payrolls, just like I just said, right? I just mentioned that. That's interesting. So all of the job gains in September came from the US government, right? If we had total payrolls rise by 585,000, but we have this 399,000 job anchor right down here, that means you had to have close to 1 million jobs added by the government, and that's exactly what happened. Almost 1 million jobs were added in September to the US government. Government jobs rose by 1 million jobs in September, whereas non-government jobs fell by that 399,000. That's a lot of public school teachers, and it might be illogical to be doing what they're doing, but it might be the case that teachers going back to work after their summer break is counted as a job addition, which is extremely interesting and very manipulative, considering the President of the United States went on his pulpit immediately afterward and said that with today's report, 336,000, that's an incorrect figure, by the way, more Americans can say that and mean it. Actually, no, that's a correct figure. Never mind, Joe Biden, I give you some props. But he's essentially saying, right, this 1 million government jobs that were added in the month of September, that represents robust American economic growth. But need I remind you that these jobs that were added in the month of September, a lot of them are public school teachers going back to work ostensibly. Otherwise, this figure wouldn't be so insane. And remember, this is a non-seasonally adjusted figure, which is the same figure that Joe Biden is using here. And so essentially, he's cherry-picking data, and economists love to do this, and presidents and politicians, cherry-picking data that does not represent the picture for the U.S. economy. That's why I'm doing this video, to explain it to you, to explain the reality of the situation to you. People are destitute. They're taking on multiple full-time jobs. But because we can be damned lying statisticians, we can cherry pick the data and manipulate it in such a way that even though teachers weren't fired and then got hired again, they just went on summer break, that suddenly counts as a job gain. Therefore, America is doing extremely well, when in fact we simply aren't. If you take a look at this chart here, this is private versus government job growth. 1 million government jobs in the month of September, minus 400,000 non-government jobs. If that plus 1 million does so happen to be millions of nearly a million teachers going back to work, then my goodness, is that a huge lie coming from not only statisticians, not only the economists and analysts, but also from the US government themselves. Absolute insanity. Lying to your citizens is never good. If we take a look, if we zoom out even further, full-time jobs fell in the month of September by 885,000 when not seasonally adjusted. And this is the biggest decline in jobs since March 2020. It seems like the Fed's long and variable lags are finally hitting the U.S. economy. So at the end of the day, the too long didn't read of all of it are that people are supplementing their incomes, which are not keeping up with inflation, right? They're doing okay, but they're not keeping up with inflation ultimately. Price inflation, with part-time jobs and additional full-time jobs, and the headline numbers are being goosed while the underlying job fundamentals continue to weaken, right? People who are absent from the workforce are pushing down the unemployment rate, and earnings simply aren't keeping up with inflation. As you can see here, now that inflation is returning to target, and like I said, wage growth will not be able to have a sustained period of positive upward growth because of the interest rate environment that we're in. Companies simply have borrowing costs that are too high and input costs that are already too high for them to raise wages. And with all of the strikes going on across the country, you can either expect a wave of mass firings or a wave of corporate bankruptcies. Bit of a staring contest there. I'll leave it to you to decide which one comes and which one causes the recession. So that's all for today, guys. A bit of a quick one. I appreciate you bearing with me. Of course, if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss on any future videos that come out. And if you're following this on Twitter, make sure to follow my account so you never miss out when I upload videos just like this. That's all for today, today, everybody. And a special thanks to River for sponsoring this channel. You guys, they're my favorite place to purchase Bitcoin. You could buy Bitcoin with zero fees when you dollar cost average, when you have a recurring order set up, and you can enjoy peace of mind having your funds totally fully reserved, backed one-to-one in their proprietary multi-sig cold storage solution. Visit river.com/TBL and get $5 in free Bitcoin when you purchase $100 in Bitcoin. That's all for today. Thanks, everyone.